have Dr. Sharad Verma, the Director of Research and Development for the Neurofibromatosis Therapy Acceleration Program and Assistant Professor at the Department of Urology at the Johns Hopkins University of Medicine. In these roles, Dr. Verma oversees a portfolio of diverse research projects focused on the discovery and development of the therapeutics for the treatment of neurofibromatosis type 1, a rare neurogenetic disorder at the interface of neurology, oncology, and dermatology.
Good evening, everyone. And so I am batting cleanup as the sun starts to set and we fade into night. First, I want to thank MIT Hacking Medicine for such a marvelous event here, and our excellent hosts from Samsung Innovations for this venue and for the support that they provide to this important initiative. So thank you for that. So I am from the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine up in Baltimore, about 45 minutes away. Baltimore's been in the news a lot over the last week or so. Some short-sighted people don't think very highly of our city. Baltimore is the charm city. It is one of the greatest cities in the United States, and it's because of its people. I'm on a soapbox here, so let me just go with it. This last week, a very important publication came out that hospitals and medical centers look at very importantly. It was the U.S. News and World Report of the best medical centers. Baltimore and Boston are just two cities in the United States that both have top 20 cancer centers. Johns Hopkins and the University of Maryland. So I think that's kind of a good metric of the city itself. That said, some of my disclosures. The points I want to make today. Was there something humorous in the disclosures? Okay, I worked in Big Pharma for a long time. I have stock there still, so. Points I'd like to make. Really, at the end of the day, it's always about patients. You know, that's who we're here to serve at the end of the day, what we do, the patients. Rare diseases are not as rare as we think they are. They are unique with their own set of challenges in the way we approach developing therapies and targeting problems in the rare disease space versus diseases with larger populations. Partnership is, of course, important when we're doing anything, but I think for the rare disease space, it takes an extra, another dimension, really that has to be patient-driven. So patient engagement is so important, and how we can improve upon that is critical to success. Things are going in the right direction for the rare disease space in terms of approvals for therapies, but there's still a lot of work to do. There are tools and organizations that can help as you hack in this space or work in this space, so please take advantage of those. And I'll talk a little bit about neurofibromatosis type 1, say that 3 times really fast, or NF1 as a disease, as a model for others to emulate in terms of a community that's come together and that's working in the rare disease space. So I was trained as a chemist originally, and so I always took a chemocentric view of the world and how I approached problems in my career in pharma. Well, we work on targets that are associated with a disease. We're trying to modulate that target so we can improve a disease state to reverse course. That means we have to understand the biology, biochemistry. We put something into the body, something happens to the body, and likewise something happens to whatever we're putting into the body. That requires understanding pharmacology, toxicology. Okay, you're fortunate enough to identify something that has a positive effect for a patient. Can you make this on scale or produce it on scale at an acceptable cost of goods? Do you have a supply chain plan? Can you identify the right patients for your clinical trial? Can you manage the data properly? What about regulatory concerns? What about clinical concerns, medical affairs, intellectual property? There are multiple reporting lines. It's a multifaceted process when it comes to making medicines. It's easy to get lost in your own single line or research area, as I was as an individual contributor as a chemist early in my career, but at the end of the day, it's that one group, remember, it's the patients. And so when you're part of a diverse team, just as in the previous speaker was talking about, he was with people with different viewpoints, different skill sets. We always remember though, yeah, you may think you have the best idea for your particular area, but what's best for the full team altogether to serve patients? Anyways, all right, moving along, thinking about the oddities when we see consistency all around us. Is this pointer? Whatever. Okay, in the right panel, you'll see that one tree looks a little curved. It's a little different. And what's going on there, right? And I kind of use that as a metaphor for rare diseases. And so really, there's a lot below the surface. They're not as rare as we think. Over 350 million people worldwide have a disease that would qualify as a rare disease. That's a pretty big number. More than 7,000 identified to date. The number is increasing continually as the genomics revolution has exploded. A third of all approvals, drug approvals in the last 5 years were for what would qualify as a rare disease. There are a great many number of medicines in development for rare diseases. I think it's over 500 now. Rare diseases are genetic in nature, they're congenital. Consequently, a great many number of these are in children. All right? And rare disease research is so important because when we learn about the genotype of a disease, it informs us on a phenotype that's applicable to a broader set of diseases that will also have larger populations. But what we learn in a particular, for example, a very rare skin disorder, that may inform us on psoriasis. That will inform us on certain skin cancers. It can inform us on other solid tumors. It informs you to a genotype that is, again, applicable to a larger phenotype. So the number of diseases with a clear molecular diagnosis is exploding. Just looking at years on the x-axis and the number on the y-axis. And something didn't quite come through in translation there, but anyways, over 7,000 today. 600 plus now have therapies that have been developed. You'll see from the early 90s onward that number really started to take off. And why? Well, with genomic screening, human genome being mapped, a lot of the tools that are available now, we are in a position now where we can identify all diseases that are associated with these maladies or with these genetic defects. It's a really exciting time, but what that also brings is challenge and opportunity. And so where are some of the areas we could potentially have when we think about rare diseases? Before I get to that, consequently, approvals are on the rise, and there are added incentives that are in place now at the regulatory level to help facilitate rare diseases development. So this is a really exciting time. Things are going on an upward trend when we see approvals taking place now for the diseases that affect smaller populations. That's very inspiring that companies are now investing when they see, like, yes, there is a case to do this. And when we think about things like priority review vouchers, that can be applied to certain rare diseases. When we think about waiver of trial costs, that can be done for certain rare diseases. So there are tools in place. Where are the challenges and the opportunities? So I'm going to just share a few, which I think, and kind of the 30,000-foot view, but you're all really smart people, and you'll get to dive into the guts of this now and identify some more specific areas. There's been an information and diagnostic explosion. Clearly, with all the genomics information that's coming out there now, thinking about all of this data, how to annotate it, curate it, associate it to certain patient phenotypes. When we think about, okay, we have all this genomic sequencing data, what do we know about that patient population, and correlating it to age, race, sex, disease status, family, all these things, that it's so important to do that as opposed to just a bucket of genomic data, but to draw clinical correlates to it. How do we manage and curate data efficiently? There's been a treatment explosion, particularly in with respect to children in the pediatric setting, and that impact it has on the health systems. And systems aren't quite ready for that, so how do we handle that? Improving education. This is a huge gap because when people, they present with symptoms or they have an illness, they'll be at their primary care doctor or primary or secondary care setting, but treatment for rare disease is going to happen in a tertiary setting. It's going to be in an academic medical center like Johns Hopkins or Penn or MGH. It's not going to be at a private practice down this, that people normally go to. And how do we improve upon that gap of knowledge between primary, secondary, to tertiary care and educating not the patients so much, but the physicians and the caregivers? How do we do that? And how can we leverage models to do that successfully? The number of specialized caregivers are limited, and I'm just pointing out this is a real challenge in the community as well. Since I think it was 1982, the number of physicians that have been board certified in clinical genetics is just 1,600. We have a huge gap there. I think just over 300 in biochemical genetics certification. There's a huge gap in genetic counselors. And so there's a talent gap that needs to be filled. Shifting from a traditional care model and how we develop therapies or deliver care for people in a rare disease population, because it's not going to be like in the case where you have a larger population. IRB reform, so institutional review board reform, so when protocols are developed and put forward, This is a huge challenge and I think a gap in the rare disease space. A lot of these studies are multi-site studies, getting an IRB approved across all these different sites. How can we do this more efficiently? And standardizing endpoints for clinical trials. And then patient engagement, and I think this is a real exciting opportunity now in the age of social media and all of the platforms we have at our disposal to reach out to people directly now and form communities, because somebody may think they're the only person with this ailment, but then hey, there's someone else who has it, and another, and another. How do we get people together now and start building communities? Because that's how medicines get made in the rare disease space. It's patient-driven. Big pharma, the world I was a part of, they're not going to come looking to develop a therapy that just affects maybe 100 people in the world each year. But if a community forms around it, academic researchers are engaged, they start generating results, they start getting funders aligned from the philanthropic community, that starts to get the attention then of the larger drug developers. For more information about this, just some of the things I've touched upon, go to this website you may be familiar with, the National Organization of Rare Diseases Research. There's a ton of information here if you're interested in rare diseases, and it clearly lays out, I think, at various points, here's a problem, here's a problem. It's easy to point out problems. Solutions are the hard part, but that's why you guys are here, right? And then you can see, like, hey, here's something I know something about, or I know somebody who knows something about this, or a problem that we could work on. There's all sorts of stuff there. It's really great. Good resources, not just issues to tackle, but then also links to other resources to help you in this space. Really quickly, the world I live in, neurofibromatosis type 1. This is a genetically inherited neurogenetic syndrome characterized by the loss of the NF1 gene. I'm not going to get all into biology unless you want me to, but maybe not. So these are characterized by peripheral nerve tumors, basically. They can be below the skin and highly infiltrative into the nerves, associated with pain, airway constriction, skeletal compression. They can be surgically resected, but they're highly infiltrative, so it's very difficult to remove entirely with surgery. So a subset of these can progress to deadly sarcomas, so there is a mortality component. About 10% of all patients with NF1 with plexiform neurofibromas can progress to what's called malignant peripheral nerve sheath tumors, and then MPNSTs, which, as I mentioned, are deadly sarcoma, which have a very bad outcome. If they get the ocular cavity, they can lead to blindness. And you see the first panel on the far left, the gentleman in the back. These can be external, just covered with these non-malignant welts, or like these lesions, highly disfiguring. There's no interventional therapy developed for this yet, but we're working on that. Incidence of about 1 in 2,500, so rare disease, but that's over 100,000 new cases in the US per year, so that's actually a pretty big number. So what are we doing about this? Well, our group, we're based in the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. We're a philanthropic funder. Those are the main features of our mission there, the 4 points. We're really about identifying bottlenecks and developing strategies to open bottlenecks, to bring together researchers, both in academia and in industry and public agencies, to help us answer some of the questions about how the pathogenesis of this disease and developing therapies to treat patients. We're part of a larger funding community, the Children's Tumor Foundation, which is the largest philanthropic funder of NF research. NTAP is the second largest, plus other groups, and the public agencies are critical for support. NIH, DoD, Department of Defense, through the congressionally directed mandated research program, has an appropriation for NF1 research every year, about $15 million through the DoD. You wouldn't think that, a disease, a neurogenetic disorder that's largely in children, is funded by the Department of Defense to do great research. So there's a community, and I guess the moral of the story here is that that it really does take a village, right? That in the rare disease space, it involves creating a community of funders, and that happened because there were some patients who really got together and started the CHIPLs, the Children's Tumor Foundation, NTAP, and the funders really inspired others to get involved. It takes a village. A couple of events to get involved with. There's going to be an NF hack in San Francisco, September 13th. So if you like to hack medicine, you're from the West Coast, you're going to be out there. We're going to have one devoted specifically to neurofibromatosis. Freddie Nguyen, who leads the MIT Grand Hacking Group, he's going to be there as a mentor. We have a good relationship with him, and we invited him to come out and get some pointers from him, and really have some more cross-pollination between our groups, really. Because we all have a common mission, and that's to help patients. The CTF NF conference will be the week after as well. If you can't make the Hacking Medicine come to the NF conference maybe. I want to thank you again. And following on what the last speaker said, by all means, enthusiasm is great. And pitch your ideas when you come up here on the stage. Don't be shy. If you think you got a good idea, don't be nervous. Come on up. Take the mic, throw it out there because, I'm sure everyone else is thinking the same thing. Is this a good idea or not? Or I'm not a good speaker. If you're here, you have to come up. Just say it. Enthusiasm is great. When I was in industry, we had a senior VP who would always go around the hall saying enthusiasm was inversely related to knowledge, and we'd look at each other and say, what? I think he's now spending more time with his family. His contract wasn't renewed, and that was kind of it for him. So enthusiasm and knowledge go hand in hand, all right? Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, and a very important quote here. All right, thank you so much, and have a great weekend.